Well, good morning, friends. Welcome to Life Community Church. My name is Kyle, and I am a trash bagger. What I have learned over the years is that it's the first one that gets the air in it, and it's the second one that, boom, gets that noise going. And I've also learned that while my wife wants to find the right trash bag that fits and is affordable, I have found that the thicker the plastic and the bigger the bag, the louder the pop. And if that's not loud enough, what else you can do is on your way out of the house, you can open and slam the door behind you so they know that you must have gone outside to do the trash. But then I realized I only take out the trash so often, so I don't have to just be a trash bagger. I've also become a dish jangler. Now, you may not know this, but every time you unload the dishwasher, there's an opportunity to make a cacophony of noise, a symphony of ceramic chaos that rallies, that spreads throughout the house. And at the end, when you get the, here's my secret though, when you get the, what's that, I don't even know what it's called, shows how little I know. When you get the flatware, that's it, the silverware out, and you take it, and sometimes there's water stuck in some of the things there, and so you gotta jingle it to get the water off, and really when you do, it's like, I'm a good husband, look at me go. Or, if that doesn't work, I also have found out that one of the best ways to let your partner know how good you are at something is let them know how hard it was while they were gone. When I'm a great husband, because I am, and I let my wife go out all by herself once every year, and I stay home. That's a joke. That's a joke. And when she comes back, she's like, "Oh, how'd it go?" It was like, "It was awesome. The kids did bop, 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 bop," and I just did it. Why? Because I am super dad. You're welcome. You can be so thankful for me. Now, some of you are like, well, why would you do this? Well, it's obvious. I don't know if you know, but in my family, my wife carries the mental load, meaning there's a checklist of 100 things that have to be done every day. I'm aware of 3 of them. She's aware of 100 of them. And I just want her to be able to check those things off her list so she doesn't have to worry about those 3 things I got done that day. It's really my gift to her, is what I tell myself. Really. As I tell her that, as I step back, I realize that's actually different. What it is I sometimes live in this idea that this relationship is not one based out of love and grace, but sometimes I think it's based on a scorecard. That she does her part, I do my part, and then we add up the scores. You get 1 point for everything you did right, you lose 2 points for everything you did wrong, and then at the end of the day, we compare and contrast to see how are we doing here. And the lower I'm doing, the more chores and flowers that need to be brought to the table. Why? Because I think there's a scorecard here. But let me tell you, when you live that way, you don't live in love and grace. You live as someone who's always keeping score, which means you're always looking at what your partner, roommate, boss, neighbor did wrong. And then what you do is focus on all the things that you do right. And not only is it not an accurate perception of reality, not only is it not good for the relationship, I realize I do it not just because I want to be even, but because I feel insecure about the amount of things or the lack thereof that I do. And I thought I was jangling the dishes or being a trash bagger for her, but then I realized it's actually just about me covering up my own insecurity about me not doing enough, me not being enough, not being a good enough husband. And so if I do that, then maybe, just maybe, I'll feel good enough. And it's not just an interpersonal thing. It's also something we do in our relationship with God. Now, you may not know it, you may not say it, but it sometimes gets revealed when life gets really hard. When you get the phone call with the diagnosis, when your marriage or a relationship with a family member is on the rocks, or when there's a financial struggle, and in that moment, you don't realize that you've had a scorecard with Jesus. Because when that happens, like, well, Jesus, I went to church. I deposited the coins in the machine. I even prayed. I deposited there. And again, I even gave money. Look, I was depositing all these. So I thought that when life hit the fan, I'd be able to come to you, my Jesus vending machine, and press the button for the healing of the relationship, the healing of my body, the new dream job, because I've deposited all these, and now I've deposited, and I'm come for my withdrawal, and God, you didn't do it. And so now, God, where are you? You been there? And in this, we realize there's something inside of us that's not quite right. Yeah, it's insecurity. Yeah, it's competition. Yeah, it's this warped view of how relationships are based on a scorecard that can never actually be even. But also I realize it's something inside of me and outside of me is out of alignment. I don't know if you know, I'm 39 going on 40, and I have the back of an 85-year-old. And what they do is they go and they took imaging and they look at my back and say, on the outside you seem to be mostly fine, but inside you're a little out of alignment. This disc is a little that way. That vertebrae is a little that way. And so every time you walk, you are adding extra pressure and you're actually doing more damage. Like, what? Or they say, and that's why sometimes if you realize your hips all popped out this way and you're walking like this because you're trying to overcompensate and you're out of alignment. You see, friends, this is what I think is happening when I'm trash bagging. My relationship with my wife is out of alignment. My relationship with myself is out of alignment. My relationship with God is out of alignment. Because my hands do one thing and my heart does another. And when that happens, that lack of alignment creates dissonance. Even if it's not about faith or trash bags or maybe you're not married, I think you understand the dissonance of being out of alignment. How many of you said, man, I'm a healthy person? You say that to yourself. I'm a healthy person. And then after the event, you're like, I did not need the third donut. And then what happens is you have, this is who I say I am, this is what I actually do, and that creates dissonance, and that dissonance actually can eat you apart from the inside out. Or it's other things. You say, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna drink that again. I'm never gonna go on that website again. I'm never gonna do that thing again. And you say, this is who I am. I am free, I'm recovered, I am all these things. And then you do it and you feel out of alignment. And then there's dissonance because I said one thing and I did another, and makes it even worse. And then what we do is we avoid and we run in shame. Sometimes we run away from people because we don't want them to know. We run away from God because we don't want him to know. And this is what we do. What I do when I'm feeling ashamed, what I do is I just put on my little trash bag covering and say, you can't know the real me. Because I don't want you to know that deep down inside I'm insecure, or deep down I'm really angry at you because you're not keeping it. Or I don't want you to know that deep down inside I don't really know how to do a relationship based on love. I know how to do transactional relationships where we each do our own part. And so I put on this trash bag to cover me and my insecurity. But really what it's revealing is that something inside of me is out of alignment. So what would it look like for God to go inside your heart, inside the core of who you are, and be a chiropractor that puts you back in alignment? How would he do that? How would I partner with him? And how would my life be differently if I wasn't always overcompensating one way or another, and I actually had the freedom to live as I was designed to live? This is the question we ask, and this is the question that Jesus answers for us. He readjusts our alignment, and he wants to do that for you from the inside out. And let me show you what that looks like. If you have your Bibles, go to Matthew chapter 6. In Matthew chapter 6, where we're at is, we've been walking through the life and teachings of Jesus, and we get to this teaching that may seem interesting, and actually verse 3 is kind of confusing. Verse 3 may not even make sense to a lot of folks, and verse 3 is also contradictory to other things that Jesus says, but don't worry, we'll get there. Jesus says this, Matthew chapter 6, verse 1, be careful. Be careful of what? Don't walk across the street because you might get hit by a car. Be careful because someone's out to get you. Be careful because there's an evil one, a liar, a devil, an accuser who's out there. Beware because the world is, nope. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Pause. He uses this word hypocrite, and I think we can all agree that no one likes hypocrites. And let me tell you, I think we like hypocrites even less in the church. Because again, if you're if you're a normal everyday hypocrite, like we just expect that from you, right? We just expect for your life on social media to be nothing like your life in real life. And we've just kind of, that's the part of the hypocrisy that we just do all day, every day. Okay, never mind. But when we do it in the church, it's even worse because you say one thing and you do another, and you're like, whoa. You're a Jesus follower. You're supposed to be held to a higher standard. you're a pastor, a leader, or even again, just say I'm a Jesus follower. That kind of hypocrisy is even worse, right? And I agree with that, and I think we'd all agree with that. But that's actually not the type of hypocrisy Jesus is talking about here. Don't get me wrong, Jesus cares about that hypocrisy. But the hypocrisy here is different. You see, the word hypocrite that Jesus uses is the same word for actor. It's someone who plays a part, who puts on a mask and a costume and has this external thing that is different from the inside. And he's doubling down on this actor language by using trumpets. You see, in that day and age, if you were a town that had a theater and a famous person came to town, let's call it Denzel Washington or whoever your idea of a famous person is, Denzel comes to town, it's like, my man, and what they do, do, and they'd announce his arrival with trumpets. But then you'd come into the theater itself, and unlike movie theaters where everything is big screen, high def, just like that, you're like every seat except for the ones in the very front are the good ones, because the very front, you're like this, you hear yourself, but every other seat is a good one. That is not an ancient theater. An ancient theater, almost everyone's sitting in the cheap seats. And so what happens is when Denzel comes on stage, you don't even realize it's him, because A, you're so far away, but also all the actors wore masks. The mask would project their character. I'm happy, smiley mask. I'm not happy, mask. I'm angry, It's essentially like emojis before there was emojis, and they were just a mask would tell you how you felt. And because you didn't know who it was, they would actually announce that the famous actor is now on stage in the middle of a show with a trumpet. So what is Jesus talking about? Jesus is talking about those who do one thing and are a different person in their heart. The people who are playing a role, acting a certain way, but that's not who they are really inside. See, when we think about hypocrites, we think about it differently. Someone who says one thing and does another, and that's a problem. But let me be clear, the people to whom Jesus are talking to, the religious leaders here, they are really good at doing the right thing. Their problem was not doing the right thing. They were the best at it. They were praying, they were giving, they were doing all the things right, except it was an external act, a show, instead of an internal reality of their heart. This is what Jesus is talking about here. And I think we'd all be like, hypocrite. And I think we'd all get that, but I think if we stopped and realized, why is Jesus so concerned about this? It's not only because it gives him a bad name, it's not only because it gives his church a bad name, but it's this. When we act in one way that's not congruent with who we are on the outside, what we do is we're playing a role and we disconnect ourselves from people, from grace, from truth, and transformation. What are you talking about? When you just come in the doors on Sunday and you've been fighting in that SUV with all those seats, you're like, I can't believe we have this many people in that car. It's just more fighting that happens on the way here. And then you come in and you just act smiley for an hour and 30 minutes here on Sunday. What happens is the real you doesn't actually get to show up here. Therefore, the real you doesn't get to be transformed by Jesus. When you show up to a small group and they're like, hey, how you doing? Like, I'm fine. Really? Yeah, I'm fine, it's fine, it's fine. It's fine. The more times someone tells you it's fine, the less fine it actually is. I'm fine. Oh yeah, I've got this hidden struggle I won't tell any about. There's still this thing in this relationship that I thought I could do better and I couldn't fix it. And I think I might lose my job, which makes me feel even more insecure. And so I'm working really hard to show how great I am, because I have to show it off at work how great I am so I don't get fired, but I also have to show it off in my small group, because what if something goes wrong with me, they'll think less of me. Or if I show I'm good to them, maybe they'll hire me for something else later. Not that you'd ever do that, but what happens in that, when we come to church, when we come to people, or we come to Jesus, and we have one external thing that's different than our insert, what we do is we've put up a wall, we've worn a mask, so that the light of Christ cannot shine in those deep, dark places of our hearts. Friends, for you to be fully transformed by Jesus, you have to be in relationships with other people, specifically other Jesus-following folks. When you can take the mask off, they can see the real you, where you don't have to hide behind the trash bag. And when they look at you, they give you both grace and truth. Amen. I love you the way you are, and it doesn't have to be this way forever. And some of you are struggling to get there because you are so good at looking and playing the part. And you get rewarded for that. You got good grades in school. Your parents are like, that was great. They even gave you leadership roles, whether it be at school or at a church or wherever it may be. Why? Because you were so good at playing that. You've been taught over and over, gold star. But inside, you realize that's not who I really am, and it kills me. Because it's who I want to be, but it's not who I really am. And so I just work harder and harder to do it. Friends, for you to find transformation, it's not just enough to be here in this room or to be in a small group or to be on a ministry team, though I want all of those things for you. You have to take off the mask so Jesus can change who you are from the inside out. But let me be clear, friends. What I am not saying is, hey, walk out the lobby and air all your dirty laundry in the lobby today after service. That's not what I'm saying. But also, to those of you who are looking at others saying, yeah, I want other people to take off the mask. Are you a person who, when someone in your row, in your small group, in your text thread, takes off the mask and reveals the thing inside that they don't want anybody to know, are you a person who can receive that with grace and truth? That says, I love you just the way you are, and transformation is possible. Because if when someone does that, you go and heap more shame on, they will never take that mask off again. When you look at them and say, you shouldn't do that, they're like, I know I shouldn't do it. That wasn't helpful. When you go, someone says, I'm really worried, and you just say, yeah, well, don't worry about it. Well, thank you. I was trying not to worry about it. Now I'm telling you, you're telling me not to worry about it. It just makes it worse. Can you be a person who says, I see you, and I see the future you, and I love both? It's not just enough to be a church that takes the masks off so we can receive transformation. We have to be a church that knows how, kind of like triage in a medical facility. We can care for the person right there and help them figure out where they are and where they need to go. This is why we cannot be a church of hypocrites, because we will not experience the life-changing love and power of Jesus. This is why it's such a big deal. Because those who are living and acting, they're in a prison of their own. And what I want to tell you, friends, God says, come out of the darkness into the light. That's where hope and transformation happens. So he starts there. What would that look like to actually come out of the light, to live differently? Well, let's keep going. Let's just take a look. Verse 3. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So your Father who is in secret, so that your giving may be in secret, so that your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. That seems pretty hard because it's controlled by the same brain. How would that not work? Like, how would I see what they're both like? I'm like, ooh, do I just go? And once they get outside of my peripheral vision, I'm like, they can do whatever they want. They don't know what they're doing. Actually, they still know they're wiggling fingers because they're actually connected. Something like this seems weird. Like what is this? This sounds like one of those things where it's like, rub your head and pat your, like that doesn't really, like what? I'm confused. How would, some of you are like, oh. Maybe it's like you're so zen that you just live and act and breathe and you have no consciousness over it. And you're like, no, that's not it either. How would you not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing? And that statement by itself is hard enough to understand, but it's even worse because of this. Jesus says the exact opposite in chapter 5. Jesus says, be so secret that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand is doing. But flip back to verse 5. He says the exact opposite. Jesus is contradicting himself. He seems crazy because in chapter 5, verse 14, he says this. He says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people put a light on a lamp and put it under a bowl. No. Instead, they put it on a stand so it gives light to everything in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. What you talking about, Jesus? This doesn't seem to make sense. On the one hand, you're like, be so private that even you don't know about it, but be so public that everyone knows about it. Well, which one is it? It's like, well, when you shine, you gotta let your light shine. You gotta take the coverings off it so other people can see it. But what? How did that work? Let's assume for a second that Jesus isn't crazy. There actually is congruence in what he says. How would we both shine to light the world and to glorify God, and at the same time, I don't even realize I'm doing it? This is how God realigns you. This is the good news, and it's this. When Jesus so transforms your heart and your actions at the same time that you begin to do it without even realize you're doing it. Let me say it this way. When your hands and your heart align, that is when your light begins to shine. Because if you start with, I'm gonna shine, all that is about wanting to be a show, wanting to be popular, and that's all about self. And like, all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go and be quiet and do nothing, there's no shine there. So how would you actually bring them together? How do you bring your head and heart together? Let me give you an example. When I was in college, I went from the same town, same group of friends I'd had for 16 years, and I'm put in a new place where I know nobody. In the first few weeks of college, everyone's trying to like size up, like, do I like you? Do I not like you? Are we gonna be friends? Are we not gonna be friends? What's going on? And I became incredibly self-conscious and incredibly insecure because I felt like every time I walked into a room, people judged me. So what did I do? I just judged them back, because if you can't feel better about yourself, just tread on other people, you just make yourself feel better. Like, I feel low, just talk bad in your head or about others to other people. It's really just a great way to self-medicate the insecurity. That's sarcasm, by the way, I'm sorry. Until one night I was praying in my room, and it's, for those of you who never had experience like this may sound weird, but it's my story and I'm sticking to it. There was this moment, it's like God came into the room with me, and I'm like, I am no longer alone, God is with me. My heart began to get warm, and I was like, what is going on? I'm like, dude, I ate at the calf, maybe I need to take some Pepsid, what is going on? And then it's like God whispered, get up and go on a walk. And I'm like, I'm not leaving this. This is awesome. I feel closer to Jesus than I have in a long time to go on a walk. And as I went on this walk, something was different. Every time I saw someone, what I saw is, oh, you are a beloved child of God. And when I saw someone, I'm like, you are a beloved child of God. I forgot how big of a knucklehead they were the day before. I don't know how, but at that. And I did this like 20-minute walk and loop, and what happened was all I did was look at people, and I'd think in myself, oh my gosh, you are a beloved child of God. And what did it do? It made it not about me anymore. You can't be insecure if you're not thinking about yourself. So I had this amazing experience, and the next day I go back to the way I used to be. And I went to a mentor, I said, Jonathan, help me understand, like, how do I live that way all day, every day? How does my heart and my hands be in alignment? So this is just who I am naturally. He was this a guru to me at the time, and he said, he quoted Mother Teresa, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be good. He's quoting Mother Teresa. And he said this, he says, Mother Teresa says that every time she looks at someone, she intentionally smiles as a way of affirming their humanity. I'm like, yo, that's not very spiritual. It's not a 40-day fast. It's not that. What is it? It's she was aligning her heart that says, I want to love every person Jesus puts in front of me. And my outward actions will begin with a smile. So what happens is I tried this every day for 7 days. And slowly but surely what happened was, when I'd greet people, I would start thinking about them instead of me. What are they thinking and feeling and want to know? And what happened is my insecurity began to get chased away. Why? Because I was loving the person Jesus put in front of me. What happened? My heart said, I want to be humble and loving. Well, then what did I do? I had to partner it with the practice, the hands, the external piece of smiling. And when I put those two together, eventually my behaviors changed and my heart changed. I became more loving, and I was just better practiced at it, and I would do it without even realizing it. Now I walk through the grocery store, I smile at people, like, do I know you? I'm like, nah, I'm just a creeper. No, I'm joking. But this is what I'm talking about when we align our heart and hands. So what would that actually mean and look like for you? Let me try and figure this out here. So I try to like understand, how do I so align my heart and hands that I do the right things without realizing it? So I was like, all right, here's my goal, right? Here's what Jesus says he wants us to do. He says he wants me to shine. I'm like, well, how would I do that? Like, what is the formula for shining? So I was like, all right, I know that somehow it has to be about hands and heart. How does that work? All right, but I realized that when I just started with hands, I became like the Pharisees, and I was just focused on the external thing, and I was just an actor. So like, well, it can't be that. Well, then I was like, well, if it's just about change of heart, like, people don't see my heart. I made a mistake my whole life of people assuming people knew my intention and my heart, and they didn't. And I would interpret my actions based on my heart's intention, and they would interpret it based on whether or not I was being a jerk or not. I'm like, well, I'm just joking. They don't know your heart. So just doing it that way doesn't work either. So I was like, well, what if I flipped it? What if it is a heart plus hands? What if it's heart before hands? And I was like, oh, that's good. What I realized is transformation began with who before do. You with me on this one? Who before do. This is who I am, and this is who I want to be, and therefore I'm gonna live in accordance with it. But let me just tell you, one by itself did not transform me. Because just saying this is who I wanna be without the right practices didn't happen. And if I had the right practices without this, it didn't work. For those like, hey, I wanna lose weight, like, I am skinny. It doesn't matter if you're not exercising and eating better. For somebody like, I'm just gonna exercise and eat better, and I'm just gonna change my behavior without changing who I am, yeah, I'll give you 16 days at most. But so this by itself didn't work, but I knew they had to go together. So I kind of put this little parenthesis like this. They both have to happen together. It can't be one or the other. But then something was missing, and I realized it was this. It was heart plus hands, raised to the power, not the second, not the third, but raised to the power of God. And my formula started to make sense when I realized my light would shine when I let God both transform my hands and let God transform my heart, and realized they had to be done together. I couldn't do one without the other. And that's where it clicked. Kyle, what are you talking about? Let me give you some examples. How do you align these things? How do you align your hands and heart? When I was in college, I told you I fell in love with the cafeteria, which means the second half of the year, I had to fall in love with the gym, and I didn't want to, but I needed to. And in this, I went and saw all the strong dudes, and what are they doing? They're doing that thing where it looks like they're like trying to birth a baby. They're like, I'm like, oh dang, I didn't realize I worked in like the nurse's practicum. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have live labor and delivery. And I realized what they were doing was this thing called squats. I'd never heard of squats, never done squats before. And I realized they all had these really big legs, and they were all muscular. And one of the things they loved to do was squats. It's like, oh, I went and did that, and I got stronger, and I looked better, and I performed better on the soccer field, and I loved it. But in the end, it was still about me. I told you I'm 39 going on 40. And now I'm still doing squats, not because I want to have the biggest, coolest legs, not because I'm playing soccer anymore. That's an ACL injury waiting to happen. Why am I doing it? Because I was told that the two best ways to thrive when you age in life is to continue to have relationships you love and the ability to get in and out of a chair unassisted. So I'm like, Kyle, you're not that old. Tell that to my chiropractor and my back. What it changed? It's the same practice. It's squats. Squats haven't changed, but one says, I want it because I want to look good and find myself a good-looking single girl. And that worked, by the way. Anyway, and then this other person, no, I want to do this. Why? So I can live and thrive and glorify God, be a blessing to my family, and live with a purpose every single day. Exact same practice, exact same hands, realigned differently with my heart, takes my whole life in a whole nother direction. So what would it be for you? Some of you, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be an angry person. I don't want to be that person who's quick to yell, quick to roll my eyes, quick to have this seething thing. And then this thing like, well, I'm just going to try to not do it and have a practice where I stop. And then you realize you white knuckle it and the willpower doesn't work and you still do it. Or you say, well, I'm just going to let my heart be changed and eventually I'll get there. And then that never happens either. Maybe you're here, you're struggling with anger. You begin to say, God, I want your peace to live in my heart. And I'm gonna do practices of whether it be breathing or journaling or praying in a way that actually helps me become that person. I'm gonna go and tell my friends, I'm really struggling with this. Will you pray for me? And when I do it, will we have some sort of like code word where you're like, oh, you're doing without realizing it. Your friend like, just say hippopotamus when I'm being a jerk, whatever that may be. And in that moment, you're like, oh, I'm practicing, this is my identity, this is who I am. As a beloved child of God, I am a person of peace who embodies his love and his presence and his character everywhere I go. And these are the practices that align with it. And when these two things are aligned, my heart will shine. So I'm like, well, this sounds crazy. I talked about earlier how my relationship with my wife used to be around trash bagging, about keeping score, about who did what and the most, and making sure that she was grateful for me and I was not a knucklehead and all those different things. And so I said, instead of doing that, I didn't want to change it. I said, here's my thing. I want to have a loving, intimate relationship with my wife. As my kids get older, I don't want her just to be my roommate. I just don't want to be this person who we learn to tolerate for the rest of our lives. And in that moment, I said, I want to continue to fall more in love with my wife. I'm like, well, how do we do this? We're busy, we're stressed, we're doing all of these things. It feels like our life is always coming and going. And so I said this. I said, I got this from another pastor. He taught me. I said, Kyle, that's the desire of your heart. Yes. Well, what's your practice? I don't know. I said this, try this. He said, try every morning when you walk out the door, stop and pray with and pray for your wife. First time, I didn't tell her what I was gonna do because my problem is I say I'm gonna do something and then I don't do it. It's another sermon, don't have time for it. So I just started to say, hey, love, before I go, can I pray with you? Is everything okay? Do you have cancer? She's like, yeah. And then you start doing it, and then every day. And then, hey, babe, before I go, hey, can you pray for me? Hey, and what happened is I had this heart. This is who I wanted to be. This is the relationship I want. And here's this practice I'm gonna have. Just every day, just a little quick, 30 seconds, minute tops. And in that, what happened is our hearts began to be aligned, my actions in my heart. And then what happened is I would miss a day and I'd miss her. Like, oh, this really changed me. And in that moment, it was no longer based around this scorecard. It was no longer based on proving it. It was no longer be like, don't be mad at your wife. Don't be insecure. Instead of white knuckling it, what happened is my heart and my hands aligned, and then again, my love was able to shine to my wife. So again, I don't know if it's with a person. I don't know what it is with you. I don't know what's out of alignment. If you're trying to show to earn love, or you're trying to show to keep people at an arm's distance because you don't want them to know the real you, maybe you're doing it because you actually think, that's how I do it. If I just do it over and over and over and over again, eventually my heart will become that person, and it's not, and you're struggling. But now you realize that with the power of God, when my heart and hands align, your light can shine. And as the worship team comes out, I just want you to imagine this with me for a minute. What I want you to do is imagine yourself when you walk in through a grocery store, instead of thinking, oh, people are the worst, they got the best avocados. What if I genuinely love and cared about these people? What if maybe, just maybe, instead of having to white knuckle it your whole life with all that discipline until you're like, I'm gonna hurt myself because I'm trying to white knuckle it with discipline, and then eventually I give up and I don't do it and I'm so tired. Instead of white knuckling it, just being, no, this is just what I do without even thinking about it. Imagine what it would look like. Instead of being in a relationship where you're trying to prove you're lovable, instead of trying to convince yourself that I'm a valuable human being, what if instead of living in that type of slavery, you had the freedom to say, I'm a beloved child of God. I was created this way. He loves me. He adopted me. He's made me his son or his daughter, and I am inherently valuable of love, whether you realize it or not. And because of that, I'm gonna love whoever Jesus puts in front of me. I'm not gonna love you because I'm trying to earn your love back. No, I'm gonna do it because I have learned how to be loved by God, and my heart is being changed, and I'm gonna practice that until it just becomes naturally what I do without even thinking about it. Imagine, friends, what would happen if your life changed from should to could. Some of y'all, friends, I love you, and I'm really not trying to be hard on you, but you are so good at shoulding on yourself. I should wake up earlier. I should eat and exercise more. I should pray more. I should do this. I should do this. I'm like, I keep listening. I'm like, you got a pretty shitty life. And all you do is go around shooting on yourself, and then you feel bad about yourself, so then I'm gonna go shit on everyone else. And what if in that moment you went from should to actually, no, it's not this is what I should do, this is who I am. This is my identity given to me by God. And he's genuinely making me that person, and I'm becoming that person. It's not I should be free, it's I can be free. I could, by his power, transforming my hearts, aligning it with my actions. Those three things together will allow my light to shine. It's not white knuckling. It's not I learned this thing and it's all different. It's about the power of God transforming your heart and aligning it with very simple practices. Somebody said, well, God doesn't answer my prayers. What would happen if your relationship with Jesus from God doesn't answer my prayers to I'm just a person who loves talking to Jesus and listening to Jesus? Oh, now he's not my vending machine. And I'm not paying in righteousness to get something out, but I just love listening and talking to him. And even when my life around me is no good, I know that the God who loves me is there with me, and we talk about it every day, and I'm not alone. Could you imagine the transformation that would happen? I don't know if you hear this or you listen to it, but every week when I close in prayer, I pray with this prayer. I say, God, and help us love every single person you put in front of us. And some of you are like, I don't even love the person in my car with me. How do I love every person you put in front of me? Imagine what would happen. That would be a church that was not trying to glorify ourselves or our church, but we were so intentional about loving the person Jesus put in front of us that they would experience the love and grace and truth that Jesus offers in every single relationship you have every single day. I love that our students are going on a mission trip. You can go and help support that financially. I love that. But what if every single day for you is a mission trip? Every single day begin with, I am loved just the way I am, and therefore I want to practice to learn how to love others. Whether it's squats or smiling or asking someone a follow-up question, imagine what would happen if by the power of God, your heart and your hands could align. Imagine how we could shine. That is the alignment that Jesus has for you. Let's pray. God, thank you for being our chiropractor who sees what's going on under the surface, that aligns to things that we don't know about or are hidden. I pray for those who hear the voice of the enemy saying, you'll never be that person, you'll never do that, it's not that easy. And I pray that you'd silence the lies of the enemy so we could hear the truth about who we are. I pray for those who are in relationships where they've just tried to change the other person. I pray that they'd learn how to be transformed by your love and your grace. I pray for those who have a struggling relationship with you, because somehow, some way, their relationship with you is all about what we do for you, what we do for you. God, transform our hearts by reminding us what you did for us on the cross, that you lived the life we should have lived, died the death we should have died, and paid the price for our sins. And we could never be even with you. We don't have to hide our sin and shame from you because you see it and your light chases that darkness away. Help us to be a people who take off our masks so we can receive the love and grace and transformation so we can then shine to every person you put in front of us. If this is your prayer, all God's people said,